Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank you, all of you, for joining my session today. My name is Kuang. I'm Deputy Head of the Department of Foreign Languages at the University of Economics and Law, which is a member of Vietnam National University of Ho Chi Minh City. Today, I'd like to share with you my study on the research engagement of Vietnamese teachers of English in the light of the construct of agency. There are 5 main parts in my presentation. First of all, I'm going to provide a quick overview of the theory underpinning my study. Then I'm going to present the methodology for my study, including the participants' information and the data gathering instruments. In the third part of my presentation, I'm going to present some key findings arising from the data, which will pave the way for my preliminary conclusions and implications of the study. And finally is the list of the references mentioned within this presentation. Now, the ideas of teachers' research. Teachers' research has been labeled in different ways, such as action research, practitioner research, collaborative inquiry, critical inquiry, self-study, and teacher research. The main aims of these activities to help teachers to keep themselves up to date with the latest changes in their field. But at the same time, teachers' research also help them to reflect on their teaching practices, to identify their strengths and weaknesses, and to propose areas for improvement. Ultimately, this process of research also enables teachers to come up with teaching innovation and exchange their ideas with other teachers, practitioners, and researchers in the fields of language teaching. Regarding teachers' research engagement, within my study, I drew on Box's 2010 definition of teachers' research engagement as the engagement in research by language teachers for the purposes of understanding their own professional context. In tertiary context, doing research is an indispensable component. We normally refer to an aphorism, publish or perish, to constantly emphasize the significance of doing research to the academic life of a university lecturer or professor. As I mentioned before, doing research can be a tool for teachers to reflect on their practices, but at the same time, they can look for teaching innovation. So such is the salience of doing research that it has become an obligation in many parts of the world, such as in China, Thailand, and Vietnam. So, given the rising concern for teachers' research engagement, I'm going to talk about the affordances and constraints that teachers encounter in their research endeavor. So, the opportunity for them is there's a wider community of teachers and researchers who are striving to carry out more research in relation to their fields and practices. However, in order to do research, teachers do face a number of challenges. First on funding for research. Now for some small research project, the cost may not be high, but for bigger, large-scale research project, the cost may be beyond the affordability of teachers. And another bigger problem is the time constraint. So you can see, like as teacher, university lecturers or professors, the majority of our time is in the classroom. But in addition to that, we have to mark exam paper, we have to design tests and exams, and we have to give student feedback. Right? So we don't really have time for other activities, especially for research. And most importantly, the research process itself is also very time consuming and strenuous. So you can say, like, in order to identify a research problem, the theory to serve our study, data and design, the methodology, and data collection, data analysis. So everything all together is very time consuming. It takes a lot of time indeed. In addition, teachers' confidence in doing research is another issue. So not many teachers are confident with their research capability because of their lack of methodological and logistical support. So these elements all together contribute to determine teachers' levels of motivation in doing research, right? So they, to some extent, they do discourage teachers from doing research because they don't really have money, don't really have time, and they're not very capable of doing research, right? Now I move on to the theoretical framework underpinning my study here. So in my study, I drew on Van Leer's 2008 construct of agency, which is comprised of three core components. So here we can see teachers' agency is mediated by the social cultural context in which they are engaged in the research activities. For example, the institutional obligation, the social cultural environment embracing the teachers, including like whether their colleagues are ready to do research and are ready to provide support, mutual support. And also the awareness of the responsibility as a teacher. So as teachers, we have to perform different roles, right? Teaching, market. So we are teachers, we are markers, we are test designers, and at the same time, we have to be researchers. So there is a huge amount of responsibility that we have to perform. And all these elements contribute to determining the way we regulate ourselves as a teacher. So we have to determine which activity is important and which is less important, right, in our academic life. And therefore, the construct of agency is a very useful theoretical concept for me to explore teachers' perspective on doing research and their research endeavor. So the main aims of my study is first on to explore the Vietnamese teachers' perspective on the values of doing research. And in addition to that, I want to uncover the mediating roles of teachers' agency in their research engagement. The participants in my study include Mr. Tuấn and Mr. Nam. So as you can see here, Mr. Tuấn holds a doctoral degree in education from the UK. He did his master in the UK as well. So you can see he spent a large amount of time studying overseas. He's now 41. For Mr. Nam, he had a Master of Arts in Applied Linguistics. He's now 30 years old. This means that he has been working as a language teacher for approximately 7 or 8 years, right? And his plan is to undertake a PhD program overseas as well, right, to meet his personal and professional needs. The main instrument for data gathering in my study is a narrative frame. And according to Park Hui Chung, 2011, a narrative frame is just like a story template that consists of a series of incomplete sentences and blank spaces so that the respondent can fill in their information. So it is a structured story in a skeleton form. So the aim is for the participant to produce a coherent story by filling in the spaces according to their own experience and reflections on this. Right. This is part of my narrative frame in which I ask the teachers to reflect on their current teaching and research practices. So you can see the full version of my narrative frame in the handouts if you can download it from the link associated with this session. Right. So now I move on to some of the key findings in my study. So based on the data, I came up with the three main themes, including teachers enhance awareness of the value of doing research, the appraisals of their own affordances and constraints, and at the same time, they also see the importance of networking in research in their research engagement. Right. So let's look at the first theme. First, we are going to look at some quotes from Mr. Tuấn to illustrate this point, and then we move on to examine the case of Mr. Nam. Right? So for Mr. Tuấn, as I mentioned before, he had a large amount of time studying overseas, and his highest qualification is a PhD. So after he finished his doctoral study, he felt the need to keep engaging in research activities in order to assert himself as an established practitioner. In addition to that, the requirements, the research requirements at university was also an impetus for him to undertake more research projects. I also see the link between research and teaching. So it can be one of the ways for teachers to identify some practical solution to their teaching problem. So in this way, the social cultural context and the sense of obligation that he has with his university and with his role as an established practitioner push him to consider further his research the levels of his research engagement. And you can see here his view of research and teaching can be of a reciprocal relationship, so they can support each other. Here we can see the operation of his agency, where he felt the need to conduct further study and publish more in the near future. Right? And for this, he needs to regulate himself, he needs to adjust his personal plans so that he can have more time for research writing. Now let's move on to the case of Mr. Nam. Right. So for Mr. Nam, he became more serious about doing research when he started working full-time at his current workplace, where research and publication is part of the requirements. So you can see the social cultural context has a strong impact on his perspective on the roles and the values of doing research. And therefore, he adjusted himself. He became less passive in doing research because he, in a way, got used to reading and writing for research in a more serious manner. And he also thinks that doing research is useful for his teaching because it not only helps him to expand his knowledge, but at the same time, it can also help him to reflect on his practice. So all of these factors contribute to renewing his perspective on doing research. And here we can see the operation of his agency in which he is committed to publishing more as like one article per year, and he also thinking about pursuing doctoral study, right? And in order to achieve these goals, he needs to spend more time to research, and particularly he needs more funding because he himself cannot afford to do these things. Another thing is he has adjusted his personal life. So prior to this, he used to prioritize teaching over doing research. But due to the fact that he has changed his career goal, so he has decided to focus more on research work. So through this code, you can see the operation and the impact of the social cultural context and the sense of responsibility that these teachers have towards their work, their teaching, and their perceived value of the roles of research, the values of research to their current teaching. Now we move on to the next theme, that is the teachers' appraisal of their own affordances and constraints. Right. So let's look at the case of Mr. Tuấn Phết. Right. So he, as I mentioned before, he did have some experience studying overseas for his postgraduate study, including a master degree and a doctor degree. So you can say research is an essential and also a major component of any doctoral program. So he is in quite a favorable condition because, as he said here, what I learned from such experiences was fundamental to my subsequent research endeavors. So he had a really strong background, which can be a significant springboard for his further research endeavor. And at the same time, the opportunity for him is that he can access a large amount of information for his research, and he's able to approach informants, maybe the students and the teachers from his institution, so that he can conduct his research project. Here, the social cultural context surrounding his research activity is very favorable. He has all the possible condition for carrying out research projects, which can be considered his affordances for doing research. However, he did also encounter some challenges, especially the limitation, the limited time for research activities. As I mentioned before, most teachers and researchers have this problem, right? So it is very hard for them to manage their time, to allocate enough time for reading and writing up their research. And here we can see the sense of regulation in which he utilizes agency in order to overcome such time challenges by arranging his schedule, and at the same time he need to set achievable targets in terms of the weekly amount, right? So he was very careful in a way that he have a very clear timetable for research, right? So you can see his strong utilization of agency and the sense of regulation emerging from his personal endeavor. Another challenge that he encountered is the limitation in terms of his research interest. He doesn't really have high motivation for conducting extensive research. So apart from the obligation from his university in terms of research activities and the potential value of research for his teaching, he was not self-motivated for doing research. Right. The final problem that he mentioned is the lack of funding. So he believed that universities should provide teachers with financial support for their study and for maximizing the opportunities for publication, especially for attending national and international conferences. So here we can see the importance of the social cultural settings for research endeavors, for teachers' research engagement, right? So there must be the kind of funding, there must be the allocation of time for teachers to pursue their research career. Now let's move on to the opportunities that Mr. Nam felt in his research career, right? So what he cherished in his workplace is that he could have the professional support from his colleagues or experienced and established researchers. So the sense of connecting with other researchers in the field within the context in which he worked. And here you can see the importance of social context, and Mr. Nam did see the values of connecting with people, right? So not many people are willing to devote time for doing research and learn from the experience of other researchers. This is also an indication of the operation of his agency and his self-regulation, because he sees the potential values of connecting with other researchers, of creating a network of researchers that help him to enhance his research experience. However, he also found some challenges in doing research, especially just like the case of Mr. Tuấn, right? He doesn't really have a strong passion for doing research. And he himself cannot concentrate on his research activities. Probably, as he mentioned here, he do need like the motivation and the level of concentration for his further research endeavors. Another thing is like he felt himself as not capable of doing both qualitative and quantitative research. He's not familiar with like using data analysis tools, and he found himself in a struggle to identify the research gaps or the research areas that may that have not been explored, and that may be something that he can undertake in his future study. So his personal limitation in terms of research methodology and in terms of the research direction that he wants to follow can be an obstacle that hinder his research endeavor. So from this, he also believed that the university need to issue more favorable policy and rewarding system. So from this quote, we can see that there's a lack of policy and kind of reward that encourage teachers for their research commitment and for the achievement that they gain from their research activities. It is evident from the data from both the case of Mr. Tuấn and Mr. Nam show that the teachers do enjoy some affordances and opportunities for their research engagement, but at the same time they do encounter certain challenges in terms of time, funding, and the kind of motivation, the levels of motivation that they show for doing research. But at the same time, in terms of policy and other factors beyond the teachers' capability themselves, we can see that stakeholders need to pay more attention to the research activities and create more favorable opportunities and conditions for a research engagement. Now I'm going to move on to my final themes, the roles of networking in teachers' research engagement. So both participants in the study felt the need to collaborate with others, right? So as Mr. Tuấn mentioned here, I imagine that I will also be able to disseminate my work on various fora. So the sense of connection with other teachers, practitioners, and researchers is very important. He's going to be more confident when he shares his work with other practitioners in the field. So here we can see his sense of responsibility because he is not researching for himself, but at the same time, he also disseminates his work, his research finding with others in the hope that they can like together improve their teaching and research. But for Mr. Nam, right, he overcame his research limitation by collaborating with other researchers and teachers, right? So this is a source of motivation for him because he can learn from the experience of others. And as you can see here, my colleagues' success in research has inspired me to make further endeavor. So the examples of success from his colleagues and peer researchers is a source of inspiration for him. So in this way, he see the example, he see the possibility of being successful like his colleagues. So there's a strong sense of regulation here because like he can um, so research is something that is achievable to him, right? Because his colleagues work in the same place and they are successful. So he is going to be successful if he has enough motivation and if he invests enough time and effort in it, right? And at the same time, he also see the values of participating in seminars and conferences on research and publication. So they would be excellent forums that ignite teachers' research interests, right? And he believed that these activities should be held on a more regular basis. So you can see here for both Mr. Nam and Mr. Tuấn, they see the values of connecting with the wider community of teachers, practitioners, and researchers, not only to share their research findings, but also learn from their success story. So in a way, this this contribute to create a network of researchers, teachers, and together they can motivate each other, and at the same time they can learn from each other, right? So this re-emphasizes the role of networking in teachers' research engagement. And therefore, these elements of the social cultural context also contribute to the teachers' exercise of their agency, just like in the case of Mr. Nam, where he sees the values of working with others and he can learn from the success of others as well, right? So these are the findings emerging from my data, and these also inform my tentative conclusion for this study, right? So first of all, as you can see from the data, your research contribute to addressing the intricate nexus of teaching theory, practices, and reflection. So both of the teachers, both of the participants in this study have shown that they do see a very clear connection between teaching and research so that they can apply better teaching ideas and innovation in the teaching. But at the same time, they do see the values of collaborating with other teachers, practitioners, and researchers so that they can provide mutual support. And at the same time, these people can be a source of impetus for them to do research as well, right? Together, they can create a community of practice that could help them to exchange ideas, expertise, and research experience. And another thing that's also important is the financial support and the resources for research provided by stakeholders such as university administration, and probably the government need to have some favorable condition for researchers and the kind of acknowledgement that teachers can receive for their research endeavors. Right? So these are the main points that I would like to share with you in my study. And this is the list of references I have used, I have mentioned in my presentation. So thank you very much for your attention. And if you have any inquiries or if you want to discuss this topic further, please feel free to contact me by email, or you can chat with me on the chat box on this platform. So thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you in future events and conferences. Thank you very much.